Young women in mainland China today are experiencing a new trend called the consumption of sexualized men. And so this means they fantasize and they consume male celebrities' sexuality. And some of these supposedly less masculine men are known as 小鲜肉, which is little fresh meat, right? So the popularity of little fresh meat in China, of course, can be traced to the spread of pan-East Asian popular culture, which does not need much introduction, especially in the Japanese and South Korean entertainment industries. So our presentation today focuses on Chinese female fans' appreciation of K-pop, so-called effeminate male idols and their queer fandoms. And through a case study of China's boycott of BTS, which is this boy band over here, we explore these fans' K-pop shipping practices, which shipping, as all of you know, is when fans imagine romantic relationships among real people or virtual characters. So some previous studies, and shout out to Tom's forthcoming book here. Previous studies have discussed how homoerotic K-pop idol shipping culture enables heterosexual women as well as queer fans to effectively explore sexuality and potentially increase queer visibility in South Korean, Japanese, Australian, Philippine, as well as other contexts that we have heard so far during this symposium. However, we also noticed that less attention has been paid to the Chinese context. And so we respond to this gap, as well as the larger question that was posed in this symposium, which is how does the Korean wave contribute to emerging networks of queer media and fandoms across the Asia Pacific? And so we investigate homoerotic K-pop idol shipping practices in China. And this is where the micropolitics of fans' consumption culture and the macropolitics of heated debates on the grand narratives of nationalism, as well as Sino-Korean relations, are intertwined. And so a brief note on the methods we drew on. I have to say this is a preliminary study, so bear with us, but we drew on data that was collected in online participant observation, in which we present how Chinese fans practice homoerotic shipping of BTS on Sina Weibo, which is one of course, one of the most popular social networking sites, also the center of fandom culture in China. We also apply critical discourse analysis of China's boycott of BTS to show these entangled interconnections between hegemonic gender discourse and national politics. And so this is our primary argument. We argue that although Chinese fans are empowered to objectify male bodies and explore sexual desire via creative shipping practices of K-pop androgynous idols, um, their agency is often limited and complicated by nationalistic sentiments, heteropatriarchy, and heteronormativity. And so before we go into our analysis, just want to give some quick background. So of course, many people know in 1978, post-socialist transformations were implemented in China, known as reform and opening up. And this transformed China from an economy devastated by the Cultural Revolution into a fast-growing power in Asia and the world. And many of these aspects of its economy was open to market-driven neoliberal rationality. And since this reform, women have become the most significant consumers in China with growing purchasing power. And in 2007, this was coined the she economy to refer to an increasingly female consumer market. And so this values women's economic contribution at the state level. And we can observe this not only from rocketing sales of consumer goods such as cosmetics, clothing, but also the rapid development of women-targeted media products, especially Japanese and Korean popular cultures. So for instance, Japanese and Korean TV dramas and boy bands often feature very young, delicate, handsome, feminine, androgynous-looking men, such as the Korean gominam, as well as the Japanese bishonen, and the Chinese 小鲜肉. And a few scholars have also talked about these phenomena, right? So for example, Zhang has discussed these men in terms of a Chogukjok, Pan-East Asian soft masculinity, which is a shared imagination of feminine masculinity within the realm of East Asian popular culture. Song has also argues that these little fresh meat images, they represent a female gaze through commodifying the male body, which reverses the hegemonic male gaze on women and also challenges um, the connotation of women as sexualized objects. So soft masculinity, of course, has some roots in Chinese Confucian Wenwu, especially Wen, but it was significantly shaped, of course, by the influx of J-pop and K-pop. Um, However, despite or perhaps because of their popularity among fans, soft masculine idols have been regarded as a kind of erosion of traditional Chinese social and cultural values because they're considered deviant or to deviate from Wu, which is the macho model of masculinity. So under the current political climate, the proliferation of so-called effeminate male images has unsurprisingly sparked very strong anti-Japanese and Korean sentiments, and even led to conspiracy theories about the West planning to emasculate Chinese men via so-called cultural invasion. And some detractors have also criticized this aesthetic trend as a crisis of masculinity among China's younger generation. So this really shows us a very deep-rooted anxiety over national virility, and have also led to a sweeping so-called Sissy phobia, which is the fear or hatred of feminine men's virility. And some young, feminine, or androgynous looking male idols have also been labeled sissy pants, and they have received widespread social criticism and policing. Some were even unofficially blacklisted by state media. And now Zhishan will take you through our case study and analysis. Zhishan, please.
Thanks, Michelle. And let's dive into more details of our case study. Next slide, please. Yeah. On 27 August last year, CAC launched a fierce crackdown against the quote-unquote toxic idol worship. And then on the 2nd September, China's top media and broadcast regulator SARFT announced guidelines to clean up overly entertainment industry, includes the so-called morbid athletic trend of Sissy idols, quote unquote, and immoral culture of danmei, which refers to the male and male romance by and for women and sexual minorities. The state censorship had led to stricter self-censorship of the platforms. A few days later, Weibo banned a series of K-pop fan accounts, including those of BTS, which just a year before have faced backlash over the Korean War comments and led to the nationalistic anger. Next slide, please. The crackdown of BTS fan club on Weibo is one of the many examples that the Chinese government strengthened the digital authoritarian over the last decade. And Chinese authorities' harsh crackdown on androgynous K-pop idols' toxic fandom illustrate various anxiety elicited by the male effeminacy and homoerotic shipping practice of K-pop idols. The boycott against BTS queer shipping practice constructs three interrelated discourse, namely nationalism, sissyphobia, and homophobia. Next slide, please. So how are BTS fans reacting in response to these crackdowns? The army in China has negotiated their space for queer expressions with the state power. They have come up with various strategies to circumvent the censorship and gender pleasing for their homoerotic shifting practice and legitimate their love of K-pop idols. China fans have clear ideas that their queer shipping among the androgynous male idols could be subjected to the state criticism and policing because their shipping contains multiple elements that deviate from the heteronormative discourse, including the male effeminacy, homoerotic, and homoromantic depictions. Therefore, they tactically invent secret languages to run the community for their imagined couples and distinguish themselves from the outsiders. To demystify these secret codes, fans are expected to have an excellent understanding of BTS ships and fan culture. For instance, the ship between Jungkook and V in Chinese is called Zheng Tai or Tai Zhen, combining one of the Chinese characters from their names. Interestingly, the different arrangement in their ship names are sexually coded and intertwined with transnational female-oriented BL subculture from Japan. The characters have roles that resemble those of the penetrator semen and the penetrated uke in Japanese boys' love culture, subculture. In the homoerotic shipping, the top is often perceived to be the position of control as compared to the bottom, and is likely to attract fan policing and lead to the intra-fan conflicts due to the disagreement about which character is more dominant within the sub-community. For instance, if someone posts anything about Zhentai in the Taizhen community, fans in the Taizhen community will be furious about the depiction of V in the uke position, which is regarded as an insult to them. Therefore, fans have to obey certain rules of 圈地自萌, which means playing within their own circle. Next slide, please. And the 圈地自萌 echoes McRobbie and Garber's interpretation of subcultures, in which fans build a kind of definitive retreat to protect themselves from the being constrained and judged by those who identify with the dominant culture. And in this example, we can see fans from the Zhentai shipping fandom not only have to tread lightly to avoid being judged by the dominant culture, but also the subcultures such as the Taizhen shipping fandom. And although there might be some overlaps among Zhentai and Taizhen shipping fans, they have to enter quote-unquote correct space before freely expressing their queer imaginations of K-pop idols. And similar rules can be applied to broader fandom of BTS, which is highly heterogeneous and hierarchical among 3 different types of fans, as the graph shows us, namely the only fan, group fan, and CP coupling fans. Only fan refers to those who are exclusively devoted one of the members of the group, and group fan refers to those who follow more than one members and enjoy their imagined friendship, while CP fans are those who play with the imagined homo-romantic or homoerotic shipping among members, which me and Liu will discuss in detail during session 7. And in many cases, only fans consider themselves the most loyal among other fans and even feel superior to them. Some only fans are highly opposed to the CP, the coupling fans, and regarded the queer shipping as morbid, holding a similar negative attitude as the state. For instance, a radical only fan conduct gender policing within the BTS community, which could lead to the serious intro-fan conflicts, just like the 227 incident in 2021 that happened to Xiaozhan's fan community. And in sum, the need of 圈地自萌 within different fan sub-communities who are shipping the same stars but different in ship names demonstrate that the fans internalize heteronormativity as the norm and regard the queer shipping as ignoble and incompatible with the Chinese society mainstream values. And next slide, please. Yeah, given the overarching state censorship and gender policing in China, fans have to employ different resistant tactics utilizing collective intelligence to create and circumvent the homoerotica of BTS. And take fan fictions on Weibo as an example. Fan tends to convert text file to images to bypass the censorship, such as what the slide showed us, because platforms like Weibo usually use the keyword matching algorithm to detect erotic content. And similarly, fans use emoji as well, such as the Noah and the 18, car, and meat. Both car and meat are internet slang referring to the erotic material in China. And even though BTS queer shipping fans are still using the ClearNet, which refers to the public accessible internet, they have built a community around the shared interests and practice of producing and consuming fan homoerotica under the patriarchy state. Meanwhile, some fans post a clean version, which means the version without the depiction of sexual intercourse, and leave the meat version in the comment with the hyperlink to other platforms, such as the mirror site or archive of home. To some extent, they can be regarded as potentially transgressive and subversive by growing the dark forest on the clear net with such kind of empowerment and agency. However, their empowerment and agency have incorporated nationalist politics, although their continued love of BTS after the backlash of Korean War is considered unpatriotic in many eyes of the nationalists. So to give you some context, in 2020, RM, the BTS leader, briefly mentioned the South Korea losses during the Korean War in a speech for an award that BTS have. However, on social media, Chinese fans respond angrily to RM's comment and call for BTS to consider Chinese feeling. This incident shows how it's difficult for us to disentangle BTS fandom from the nationalist sentiments. In this aftermath, fans who continue to support BTS have displayed quote and unquote correctiveness to the nationalists by saying, I also don't like the threat country. I just love the K-pop culture. Why do I deserve to be labeled as the unpatriotic and brainless fangirl? Look at you, man. NBA stars have made controversial remarks on Tibet and Hong Kong issues as well. But why you are still watching it? Shut your mouth up. And in this quote, the angry BTS fans call South Korea as a threat country to perform her political correctiveness. South Korea has come to a conflict with China several times on the issues of cultural heritage and appropriation, such as Spring Festival, Dragon Ball Festival, and so forth. Therefore, nationalists in China used threat country to refer to South Korea. And meanwhile, this fan stirred up another dispute about the NBA stars' offending remarks over Tibet and Hong Kong to deflect the nationalist criticism. And interestingly, BTS and NBA fandom are also highly gendered, as most BTS fans are women, whereas many NBA fans are men. Trying to moralize her stand as a patriotic BTS fangirl, this fan points out the double standard in different fandoms, which is problematic. And of course, one could say BTS fandom presents a larger threat to the state and the state proponents, because consuming the feminine-looking Korean male idols is seen as deviating from Wu, the Chinese macho model of masculinity, whereas NBA fandom reinforced the hegemonic masculinity through the fandom of a contact team sport, albeit one hailing from the state. Next slide, please. And furthermore, fans emphasize the state-run media's recognition, which serves as an effective instrument to fight against the nationalist attacks by Little Pink. And Little Pink, 小粉红, is a derogatory term for young grassroots nationalists who use the internet as a front line of cyber patriotism. For instance, one fan said, BTS have been aired on CCTV a couple of times. Do you believe CCTV is too silly to shoot themselves in the foot? And in this quote, the fan stresses the coverage from the state-owned media and uses it to legitimate her own positive attitude toward BTS, at the same time protecting herself from the cyberbullying by the nationalists. And interestingly, this positive coverage from CCTV she mentioned happened in 2019, before the BTS 2020 offending remark. And she intentionally or unintentionally laid out the logical argument and evidence in a vague timeline. This example shows how the Chinese fan continue negotiation between the BTS queer shipping culture and state power are deeply intertwined with the hegemonic gender discourse and nationalistic politics. On the one hand, the fans vigorously defend themselves against the nationalist sentiments, but on the other hand, they paradoxically act as nationalists to avoid censorship and cyberbullying. Okay, I'm going to turn to Michelle to conclude our presentation.
Yes, thank you. We have 1 minute left, and that's just nice for a conclusion. So the tactics we have discussed in our presentation reflect Chinese fans' resistance and negotiation of nationalistic, sissy-phobic, and homophobic discourses, which are interrelated. So on the one hand, we have queer K-pop fans who are empowered to objectify male bodies and explore sexual desire, which demonstrates their participatory productivity and creative performativity. And although their practices have been hindered by state censorship and nationalist activists, they insist on embracing these non-normative expressions and reclaiming their sexual pleasure. So to some extent, this could be considered transgressive and subversive to the state discourse of gender hegemony. On the other hand, queer fans' agency have often been limited and complicated by nationalistic sentiments, heteropatriarchy, and heteronormativity. And so their tactics reveal that it remains unknown whether these queer practices of shipping K-pop effeminate idols really challenge the status quo. And thank you for listening. We look forward to your comments and questions.